Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we often say is that we are tired of young earth creationism, old earth creationism. We're tired of it. And we especially have a bone to pick with young earth creationists. But I think the bigger bone to pick will be with atheists, even on this. Let's see. Before we get to it, please support our work on redpillreligion.com. Remember, in these days of social media, we've been chased around a lot. We're on our third channel, trying to build. By the way, we are on our third channel, so please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Please hit that bell if you're interested. We'll see if it even works. We would really like you to help us get up over 1,000, up to 2,000, 3,000. We had our old accounts massively censored and, mystery phantom disappearing followers multiple times and false flag harassment. And we're starting over fresh also with a new attitude. So please remember, you can always find us on redpillreligion.com. That's our safest location. And we could use your PayPal, Bitcoin, and Patreon donations. Patreon, we're hanging on for those of you who are loyal on Patreon. We do especially appreciate you who send us Bitcoin or make recurring or even one-time donations through PayPal. We're looking to upgrade equipment. In fact, if people have recommendations and want to help raise funds or give other assistance in upgrading audio quality, we could use some help with that. In the meantime, anyway, you'll find every day we've got all kinds of videos, all kinds of articles, and in our archives, you'll find items you can no longer find elsewhere online. Some of our old content is only on redpillreligion.com at the moment, available, or on Patreon. So anyway, also feel free to join our Discord chat room, our free Discord chat room, regardless of your religious views, as long as you are not hostile to the religious people we have. We have Jewish people, agnostic people, atheist people who don't mind hanging out with religious people, people of various types of Christians. We do have a pretty orthodox slant on our Christianity, though, so sometimes evangelicals and Protestants find us prickly. But it is what it is. We like talking about science, philosophy, geek stuff, gamer stuff. We're all basically nerds here. So please feel free to drop by and say hi if you want. Find us on Gab.ai or Gab.com at Red Pill Religion. Find us on Minds.com at Red Pill Religion and on Facebook on Red Pill Religion. I don't know how much longer we'll be on Facebook, but we'll see what we see. Anyway, I'm pleased today we are joined by the Slim Jim. Say hello to everybody, Slim Jim.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and please go and subscribe to Slim Jim's channel. We should have the link for it there in the low bar. If you have any trouble finding it, just let us know. And also joining us tonight is Jean-Baptiste, who is one of the Red Pill Religion co-founders. Say hi, Jean-Baptiste.
Hello, everybody.
All right, and Jean-Baptiste is okay. I believe the Slim Jim, you're one of my fellow Catholics, right?
Yes, I am. Maybe not particularly good at it, but I am Catholic.
I know exactly what you mean by that. I really do. And Jean-Baptiste is one of those dirty schismatic Eastern Orthodox. Get a proper pope, you heretic. Now say hi, Jean-Baptiste. Oh, you already did. And then that reminds me, I should put up the slide, because I had really wanted to talk about the Slim Jim, and maybe this will open up a conversation among other Christian YouTubers, and also among Catholic YouTubers. I know Levitical, for example, is back out there, or Lev, he's going by, and he's actually also Catholic, and he's a strong young earth creationist, and I've tried to get him to come on and talk to me. He hasn't really gotten back to me on that, because I really want to talk about this issue. And the Slim Jim, you had made a video, which I'll make sure to get into the links later. I'm going to show it now. You had made a video about young earth creationism and how much you hated it. And I would have to say it was a little emotional, but that's okay, because I have felt that same emotion at the same time. Young earth creationists have driven me crazy. And so, I mean, what was your, and I know you've gone after Kent Hovind, but the subject of young Earth creationism bothers you in general, doesn't it? Why is that?
Well, I guess there's a lot of context for this particular issue. So, have you heard of the Great Debate Community?
Yes, and it's a horrible, horrible place that Christians should not go to. Oh my God, they're horrible. What they do, it's so awful. And Christians get sucked into that place. Go ahead. Yeah, I know the Great Debate Community.
So that's kind of how I got my start. Believe it or not, my first big exposure to the Great Debate Community was through Steve McRae, with whom I believe you're well acquainted.
Oh yeah, the man is really. Oh my God, he has the morals of a. He really needs to get a conscience. Is all I'm going to say. As he and the people he hangs out with. But yeah, so you were at the Great Debate Community, and of course, I'm not. I don't even need to know more. You as a Christian were sitting there getting infuriated by idiot Christians and people at the Great Debate Community behaving as if the idiot Christian was a typical Christian, because that's one of the most hateful things all those people at Non Sequitur Show do. All of them, Crocoduck, Shannon, McRae, anybody on the Great Debate Community, they always want the dumbest Christians they can get. That's what they want, so that they can make all Christians look dumb. And of course, some of the dumbest Christians happen to be young Earth creationists. Although I will say, there are some evolutionist Christians who are equally as rock dumb. They're just not invited to those conversations. Or maybe they are, because they make dumb arguments for evolution.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. And I know yes. Jean Baptiste, wait a minute, let me interrupt, because I know Jean Baptiste, you've had similar feelings, right?
Right. Well, with what was going on with creationism and everything, it's the whole thing about the ideology is I think is not actually based on the Bible. It's based on what people want the Bible to say, like especially young Earth creationism, because I do not understand where they get the 6,000 number from. Because we had civilizations way before the 6,000 mark. Like Abraham came from a civilization, so there was a time before 10,000 years ago. There were still cities. So I'm not really understanding how even within the Bible it says that I don't get the 6,000 mark.
And so I'm actually going to say something to contradict myself and come to the defense somewhat of young Earth creationists in a little bit, but I want you to go ahead and finish your thoughts, Slim Jim.
Well, that's actually kind of that's what motivated me to start critiquing young Earth creationism, is the sort of people that would show up in the Great Debate Community, or GDC, as we like to abbreviate it, and it does paint a very negative picture of Christianity, and it plays to the stereotype that faith is more or less feels over reals, and that bothers me. I try to put a lot of thought into any position that I hold, whether it be political, religious, philosophic, what have you. And as somebody who does put quite a bit of thought into it, the idea that I would be stereotyped as this sort of guy with these sort of beliefs, it bothers me, and it turns a lot of people off. Right, other people who I think would otherwise have been more receptive to the message of Christianity in the past now have this kind of, well, yeah, you religious tards are dumb fucks. Pardon my French. I didn't mean to demonetize your stream there.
No, that's okay. They'll never monetize us. We get censored all the time until there's a new regime at YouTube. Anyway, plus, we swear around here sometimes. I'm trying to do less swearing. But here's what we're really looking at here, though, is what I think, because I'm actually going to tell you there are some really intelligent young Earth creationists. All right, not that many, but they're out there. This is what is known. I don't usually link Wikipedia because Wikipedia is fake and full of garbage, very ideological garbage. But this is safe enough to define a wedge issue. This is something done in political science. This is political science, actually, and it's applied political science because it's used extremely well, developed probably most effectively by leftist Marxists, but originally, but you know, don't ever fall for that. Well, that's just something leftists do, because a lot of people on the right, or the so-called right, are very adept at creating wedge issues too. This is an issue designed to polarize people, when there shouldn't need to be any great polarization. Because I would say that, and I can even give you this testimony, right? I'm old, I grew up in the 70s, basically. I was born in 66, it's no big secret. So, and while I had a very patchy religious upbringing, I had enough exposure to Christians to know that most Christians just didn't care that much about the evolution issue at all. And many of them could see right away that it just wasn't that important an issue. And that you could jibe, you know, Genesis with what we were seeing in evolutionary theory. You could, you can, you still can. And it just wasn't that important in the vast scheme of things. And then you have this hardcore fringe of Christians for whom it is like the central, it becomes like a rallying cry to defend the faith. I've even seen, I mean, I went into one, I might even send this to John Singleton, the guy who runs that AAE open forum, because, you know, I went in there and was right away assaulted by King Jamesers, who, of course, King Jamesers really have the hate on for the Catholic Church. I mean, that's just part of their religion, is hating on the Catholic Church. It's just their faith tradition. I grew up around it. But I mean, he immediately starts attacking me with easily debunked lies, and one of them is Pope teaches Big Bang. Pope teaches evolution. Pope teaches a Big Bang. Now that's a straight up lie. And he was told it was a lie. The guy who was doing it, I don't even remember who he was. It wasn't Singleton. I'm just saying, the guy who did it would not stop. No matter how many times he was corrected, he would not stop. But I really think that, I genuinely believe an evil demon spirit gets into some of those King James guys when they cannot speak to a Catholic like a human being and listen to what he is saying, and acknowledge him, that he might have a point about something somewhere. And I've had that kind of experience with young Earth creationists my whole life. Young Earth creationists obsessed with wanting me to disbelieve evolution and believe their young Earth creationist or their other creationist theory, like it was the most important thing in the world to them. And I genuinely believe at this point, no matter how well intended they are, such men are poison to bringing people to the Christian faith. But that does not mean you can't be a young Earth creationist. This is the other side of it to me. First, let me clarify the Catholic position. And this position was what made it one of the things that made it possible for me to be a Catholic. Because when I became Christian, I believed in evolution. And I really couldn't stand young Earth creationists. I thought they were stupid and just attacking science. And it made no sense. It made the religion look irrational. It made Christians look totally irrational to me. So I totally see when people in their 20s and 30s now are seeing it the same way. Like, evolution makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. And whether you like it or not, millions of people have been taught to believe that it's normal and to think it's normal to think that way. Even if they're wrong, you're not going to bring anybody to Jesus by trying to sell them on young Earth creationism. You're going to actually alienate a lot of them and make them think you're crazy. And what you're also going to do is alienate some of your other Christians for whom this is not the most important issue in the world to them. And you're going to alienate and annoy other Christians for whom, no, they don't see it your way. And they have come up with ways to explain. Now, of course, a King James guy is not going to have that much respect for a Jew, but I would think theologically, but still, I will recommend a book called The Science of God by Gerald L. Schrader, an Orthodox Jewish physicist who has a very in-depth look at how things like the Big Bang Theory and evolution match completely perfectly map to what's in the book of Genesis, using some very deep readings of the book in the original Hebrew. And he's a Jew. He's good at that. And the Jews do have some meaningful thoughts on the book of Genesis, I would think. And he's not the only guy like this. And now these, these young earth creationists will scoff and find some other way and to dismiss their other Christians and suggest somehow you're not really Christian if you believe in evolution. And that's vile, abusive heresy. And if you're a young earth creationist, you should stop that. It's vile. If people, they don't have to read the book of Genesis your way to be a Christian. So far, I'm still giving the creationists a hard time, and because I've had the same emotional experience John Baptiste has, and that the Slim Jim here has had, of being frickin' abused by atheists by being accused of being a young earth creationist, and of being accused of not being a proper Christian. Or not having, maybe not even being saved, because I think evolution makes sense and it's okay. And all that is just repellent behavior, and it's behavior only two groups of people do to me: nasty, hateful atheists and abusive Christians who will not stop and simply listen and have a conversation with a fellow Christian just because they disagree on something and want to just lash their 6,000-year earth or whatever variation it is at us, like we have to care, like we have to even care. Oh, that's what gets me. Like I have to care. It's not that important. It is not essential to my salvation what my position is on evolution. It's just not. And nobody else's is either. Now, with all that said, can I tell you all a strange story about one of the reasons I stopped being an atheist? One of the reasons I stopped being an atheist was because I would beg my fellow atheists to just leave the young earth creationists alone. They were annoying, but by constantly fighting them, you were making them stronger, and you were making them louder, and you were making them bigger, and you were embarrassing everybody. That's what I told my fellow atheists. Let it go, I said. There was an article published in Science magazine more than 10 years ago by a really respected scientist. And Science magazine, by the way, is the most respected peer-reviewed science journal in the world. It's just called Science, and it's just that prestigious. Science and Nature are the two biggies in all the peer-reviewed journals. And this was in Science magazine. And the guy just said, listen, let the kid, if creationism is so important, let the kids spend an hour having or a day having a debate over it, and then go back to teaching biology. Because in reality, no matter how much they lie to you, it is not essential to understand evolutionary theory to understand science. Anybody who says you have to understand evolution to understand science is a liar. I knew this as an atheist. Because the theory of evolution is not essential to describing how physics works, how math works. It's not really even that germane to most of the study of medicine or biology. It has some uses and has provided some insights, but in reality, discovering kidney function does not require that you consult with an evolutionary biologist, to figure out that you need a heart transplant or whatever's going on with you medically. Nobody should care. Your mechanic does not need to know. What do you care if your mechanic who fixes your car thinks the earth is 6,000 years old? What do you care? Is he going to be incompetent? Is your doctor not going to be able to prescribe the appropriate antibiotic for your infection because he questions Darwinism? Will he not know what a kidney is anymore, or what a kidney stone is, or whatever it is? As an atheist, I was saying all of these things. Like, you guys are just hysterical over this. Let it go. It is not that frightening. And there was even this claim that, the evil fundamentalist right-wing Christians are trying to sneak creationism into the schools. No, this history of evolution in the schools has gone on for decades. But no, there was nobody trying to sneak anything in. There were some groups who simply were against having their children indoctrinated into evolution. And they wanted to say, we object to this theory. And I, as an atheist, said, you know what, parents have a right to that objection. And if they want to, you know, most of these people aren't going to go on to be scientists or doctors or whatever. Leave it go. There's no reason to have this horrible fight. That's all things that I said as an atheist. And you know what happened to me? My fellow atheists tried to destroy me personally. You will even still see to this day in stuff on the internet about me claiming that Dean Esme says that it's a good idea to teach creationism in the schools, which is a flat out slanderous lie. I have no way of getting that off the internet, or if anybody knows how I get it off the internet, I don't know. But it's just a slanderous lie. I never said that. I said, well, let the kids have a debate and you know, let local schools decide this. And really, what are you afraid of? And they really had nothing sane. They were on a witch hunt. They were on a witch hunt to get the dirty creationist thought that might be out there somewhere. And it was very obviously a witch hunt on the part of the atheists I met. And I saw this group behavior where they had to destroy all young earth creationist thought. And you had to expunge all religious thought from schools because religion is not science. It's not science. It's not science. And here I was, an atheist who, I love science, and I've read some of the most brilliant scientists in the world. I've read Einstein himself. I've read Feynman. I've read Mullis. I've been a science kid my entire life, and this was a witch hunt. And if this was a witch hunt for the dirty creationist thought, and they wanted to destroy me for just saying, let it go. It's not the most important thing in the world. And that experience, along with a couple of other horrible experiences with the atheist community more than 10 years ago, was made me think, these people are like a religious cult. I don't want to associate with them. And for a while there, I just said, you know what, please just don't call me an atheist. I still really kind of was one, but I was like, please don't call me one of these people. They're horrible. And I'm talking about people in the realms of P.Z. Myers and Rebecca Watson and all those people. But also, even to this day forward, I've had more than 10 years of it. And these asshole atheists like Carl Sargon of Akkad or whatever, just every young atheist under 30 or under 40 even seems to think his favorite pastime should be go pick on the Christians about young earth creationism. It's a form of psychological abuse that's hard to take. But these were all things I thought as an atheist. I just saw the insanity of it, and frankly, the science illiteracy. Because anybody who thinks that you cannot be an intelligent, learned person and a good scientist and a young earth creationist is flat out wrong. I have talked to people who are working physicists with PhDs in physics and multiple proven patents who are young earth creationists, and they're charming people, and they're passionate about what they believe. And you know what? Since their beliefs about the age of the earth and evolution have nothing to do with the field of physics that they're working in, as an atheist, I would just say, well, I think your ideas about biology are kind of weird, but obviously you've invented some really cool laser technology and other things, and are a brilliant physicist. These are thoughts I had as an atheist. And that's how it kind of boomerangs back around to me. It goes the other direction. Now I get mad with the young earth creationists, but it's not actually because I want to defend evolution. I don't want to defend evolution. I've had some creationists come to me and say, oh, so you're an old earth creationist. I'm like, no, I'm a nothing. I'm one type of creationist, which is that I believe that an intelligence is running the laws of physics and probability. That's what God does, amongst other things, is run the laws of physics and probability. And my actual ability to go out there and confirm for myself that the Big Bang Theory is true, or confirm for myself that Darwinian evolution is true by falsifying it with a time machine, going back billions of years to document it literally. No, I'm not capable of that. I take the people on faith. I take evolution on faith. It makes sense to me. It seems to describe things pretty well. So just like everybody else who believes in evolution, I take it on faith that it's true. Because like 99% of people who run around like godless engineers screaming that they know evolution is true, they don't know evolution is true. They think it is because they believe the people who taught them evolutionary theory. In some cases, not very well, because King Crocoduck, for example, is a physicist who does not understand contemporary evolutionary biology at all. So even if you're an atheist, you should avoid some of those people like Crocoduck associated with the great debate community, because Crocoduck misrepresents what actual evolutionary biologists in contemporary in the field talk about. He's a physicist who's not qualified particularly to talk about evolution or biology. No more so than the average high school biology teacher, let's say. He's no more qualified than that. In fact, he may be less qualified to talk about evolution than your average high school biology teacher. I certainly know that at St. Rita High School, a Christian high school, back in the 80s, Dr. Gisecki taught my freshman biology class at St. Rita, you know, that Christian school. And he had a biology. He had a PhD. He had a PhD in biology, and he was teaching there at that Catholic school. Not very well paid either, but his passion was teaching biology, and he taught us evolution. By the way, it didn't take long because evolution is not that hard to understand. And then we got into all the stuff that really matters in biology, like meiosis and DNA and RNA and cellular structure and on 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 and on, right? Because it truly, I don't care what atheist ideologue tells you this, it is a lie to suggest that a deep and profound understanding of evolution is necessary to understand biology. It isn't. It isn't. And when you talk to actual working biologists, most of them spend very little time talking about evolutionary theory. They're more interested in catalog. I mean, they're interested in it. They make observations kind of based on the idea. But for the most part, they're cataloging things and sorting things and testing things like scientists usually do and exploring things. I mean, there's no, the number of working biologists on the planet who have to spend more than a fraction of a second of a day thinking about evolution and what they do. I want to know who they are. It's this bizarre obsession of atheists and certain types of Christians. And I truly believe, I know I'm going to let other people talk here now because I should stop, but this is what's called a wedge issue. The atheist movement was designed to be an anti-Christian movement. That's what most people rocking the capital A atheist logo are about. They're about hating Christians first and anything else second. A lot of them now will claim they hate Islam more, but frankly, I like my Muslim friends better than most of these professional atheists. This is a wedge issue. The atheist movement was designed to make people hate Christians, and one of them is to divide Christians over a minor issue, truly. I genuinely believe young earth creationists drive people away from the Christian faith at this point with their deluded obsession with the question. Like somehow that matters versus the importance of the incarnation of the divine logos, the word Jesus Christ. That might be a little more important than your opinion as to how many years the earth has been here. Maybe Jesus is just a little more important than that. But at the same time, if you could just let it go and have it as like, well, this is what I think, and we can just, we can talk about it and we don't have to agree. Because this goes back to what the actual Catholic Church's position is. First, the actual Catholic Church, and if we're talking about Rome, was not particularly that interested in the evolution question. You did find some Catholics immediately condemning evolution, including some bishops, and you had some other bishops who were like, come on, wait a minute, you're overreacting, this is just some science, let this debate play out, it's not that important. There were other bishops who were like that. And the Vatican literally took about 30, 40 years, I think, to come to a really like a formal conclusion. And what the Vatican said was very simple, and it's still the teaching today. It is acceptable for a Catholic Christian to believe in evolution. If it makes sense to him, it is acceptable to believe it. You're not required to believe it. It should never be a dogma of the church. Nobody will ever be required to believe in evolution, but if you can if you want. Now, some hardcore Catholic hater or just some hardcore young earth creationist who doesn't find that an acceptable point of view, I don't know what it is, what to say to you. You really think it's not acceptable to believe in evolution. It's not allowed. It's ludicrous to say we're not allowed, and that's all the Catholic Church has ever said. Same thing on the Big Bang Theory, by the way. Although one of the popes, like half a century ago, was a little too enthusiastic about the Big Bang Theory as proof of something. The Catholics Georges Lemaitre, a Catholic priest, formulated the Big Bang Theory, but Georges Lemaitre was very humble about it. He said, this is just a theory. You can't use it to prove anything. This doesn't prove or disprove God. This has, all I did was show that if Einstein's theory of relativity was true, and the universe had a beginning, so I just assumed what Einstein said was true, and I did the math and figured out how old the universe would have to be and where, how it would have all had to come out. And that's how he developed it. But he said, I don't know this is true. This is math I did. This is a theory. It makes sense to me. And again, I will point somebody to like this physicist, Gerald Schrader, will also tell you why it makes sense if you read the book of Genesis. So, but you're not required to believe it either. And I really wish more Christians, and this is for Levitical, this is for anybody else, would just see the people who want us fighting over the age of the earth mean us no good. I don't see how the young earth, the creationist debate is benefiting anybody. On the other hand, there's people who've always doubted evolution and they're not particularly religious or are from other religious traditions. There are people who can look at the objections that people have to current temporary evolutionary theory, and there are a lot of objections that are very valid and very strong in contemporary evolutionary theory. There's a lot of them who aren't Christian at all, who just look and say, I don't believe this evolution stuff. It's not that simple. They're allowed to have their opinion too. And so now I'm done. Would anybody else like the floor? Go ahead and unmute. First, unmute yourself. You want to try me, Slim Jim?
Well, going back to kind of like the beginning of things, right? Like, I don't want to give a false impression about a lot of the people I encountered in the Great Debate community. By and large, most of the people that I've met from there, aside from maybe a couple personalities, are actually pretty chill. And two of them have actually become pretty good friends of mine.
Okay, so maybe we'll have to have a talk about that because my impressions are so negative. Maybe they're reforming over there. I don't know.
Well,
okay.
So this goes back, though, like a couple years, and about maybe a year and a half ago, there was kind of a split. And I'd say most of what I would like to call the reasonable people kind of just left en masse and said, you know what, forget this. A lot of behind the scenes problems with personality types and some accusations flying back and forth. So a lot of the cool people left and migrated kind of towards our own very loosely affiliated corner of the internet, which is where I kind of got inspired to start my thing.
This is what I really want to have, and I want, and not just Catholics, but Christians everywhere to say, please, please just stop. There's more than one way to read the book of Genesis. There really is. And one thing that I've told a lot of people is that when it comes to science, I'm not particularly smart, nor am I particularly interested in I'm a bit of like I guess an astronomy enthusiast, but by no means am I very good at it. So what I like to tell people, especially fellow Christians, is look, I can't say for sure one way or another how it all got started beyond in the beginning God created, right? I weren't there. I don't know what actually happened. And quite frankly, I don't need to know what happened in order to remain a Christian. No.
It's not an article of faith. It's not a make it or break it issue. It's not like holding to a heretical view of the Trinity like Arianism or Nestorianism, right? Like, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's a really small issue.
Yes. There you go. And the Christians who can't let go of it, I truly believe with all my heart. First, I believe a very intelligent person can believe in young Earth creationism too. I've met people who are obviously very competent and accomplished physicists and other kinds of scientists who are young Earth creationists.
Well, yeah, there's otherwise smart people.
They're sincere. Well, you know, they've got their own read of the scripture. It's very clever and very detailed. And so you don't even want to get into an argument with them. They've read it the way it makes sense to them. They put a lot of thought into it. So fine, they're confident in their position. Let them be, is about what I would say. I don't even have to call them stupid. I've said, literally, here's the thing about the book of Genesis. Some people don't like talking about it, but it's true. You go through historic literature of commentary written on the book of Genesis. While it is generally true that there was a broad acceptance of a calculation of something in the neighborhood of 7,000 years among Christians, 6, 7. So that would, it was kind of a broad thought that, you know, that made sense. It was about 6,000 years. Well, 5, well, except that was 2,000 years. So they were kind of broadly accepting a number in that range. But it wasn't like a central article of faith. But you can find Jewish scholars from before Christ and after, as well as Christian scholars after Christ, who wrote all kinds of things about Genesis and never said a word about the age of the earth. It's incredibly insightful. Just I've read some amazing descriptions of you know, and interpretations of the book of Genesis and all the messages God gave us in, you know, like when Adam and Eve sinned, the so-called original sin of Adam was really like about a dozen sins between the two of them at once, you know, just for starters. And you know, you see in the book of Genesis how God gives Adam the power to name things, which is actually an extraordinary power. And that what made him the first scientist, because he, you know, cataloging, saying, okay, that is horse, that is tree, that is that. When he found Eve, he named her woman, and then he named her Eve. He had the power to name things, which is a power to define reality in a very real way, especially if you study epistemology. Anyway, the whole earth, there's so many layers of meaning to the book of Genesis. How old is the earth literally is the least interesting a question read I can see. And you can find various religious scholars writing about Genesis, even talking about the age, and fully acknowledging that the numbers are approximate, that we don't have to read things all quite this literal. I mean, the idea that we're restricted to a literal reading is false. There have been Jews from before Christ and Christians from after. We just always we're looking at Genesis very differently, and so I hate this narrow-minded obsession on literally calculating it out based on. I mean, they base it on all the generations given in various books, and they bring in calculations of known dates from this or that king and stuff like that. Various people have come to various numbers, but yeah. The thing is that even in the eras when young Earth creationism was kind of the standard assumption, it's because some guy worked it out and everybody said, well, that makes sense, and moved on. It was never a central dogma to anybody. Like, really. So, all right, we have our, I can't tell because his spiritual journey keeps shifting around. Where are you back to Christ these days, Eric, or are you off on some demonic Gnostic thing again?
Oh, hello, everybody.
Analytic alchemist.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're Catholic. You're supposed to be killing me right now.
That will be after, yeah, that'll be after the show. Go ahead.
Do you guys want my thoughts on something? Or?
Yeah, but you've got to reveal your spiritual position where you're coming from, because are you Christian or you're not Christian? Because that's.
Let's just say
you're still
spiritually searching, but I keep finding that Christ makes the most sense to me.
Good. Well, some Christians are going to tell you you need to immediately ask Jesus Christ to accept, ask Him to come into your heart and accept Him as your Lord and Savior. Although I can tell you from personal experience, having done that, it doesn't always have much effect. My journey to Christ was much more slow. So do whatever works for you, man. Let me know if you ever have any questions. But anyway, I shouldn't have gone off on that. That we don't usually preach on here. So what is your thoughts on this creationism thing? Because you're outside the faith and have a very different background.
Well, in terms of young Earth creationism, I don't think the 6,000-year-old model holds any water at all. So like you guys, I guess I just don't understand where they get that age from. Because I mean, even if you go with a young Earth model, 6,000 years is way too young even then. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, I will say in their defense, they have answers to that. That the carbon dating techniques are flawed and junk, and so the techniques they're using to arrive at these archaeological dating methods are all skewed and stupid and based on bad math and bad assumptions. Mm-hmm. So in the same way they'll say the evolutionary theory itself is flawed, they will say, no, listen, you're believing in carbon dating and you're believing in this assumption that they make that may not be true, and this assumption that they make that may not be true. And that is why I kind of also encourage Christians to be a little chill, and also atheists and everybody else, because if you really understand how science works, you should always be able to ask any question for the most part. And so even if the theory is, I mean, really, 6,000 years literally doesn't make sense to me. You have to make me throw out everything I know. But maybe the young Earth creationist is right after all. It's the obsession that it polarizes people. It wedges people. It's a wedge issue. It's a way of separating people. You know what I mean?
So while I reject the 6,000-year-old model, I also reject evolution and millions of years. So I take like a middle ground. So it may be like, I don't know, that I guess I could have like,
Okay, I want to hear this because I want the atheist audience and the you are. I'm not trying to drill into your background, but I know you kind of had a half-assed religious education, probably like I did. Mm-hmm. And you've been confused and you've dabbled in other kind of spiritualities and you're not sure where you're at. So you're not indoctrinated with young Earth creationism or anything else. You're not indoctrinated against evolution, I assume. So tell me, where did you start having your doubts there?
Concerning like evolution and that stuff, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, you obviously didn't come from a biblical perspective and go, no, I question evolution because Ham began so-and-so, begat so-and-so, and lived to so many years. That's not where you're coming from. So
right.
Yeah.
I just take a purely scientific approach to it. Like I studied the history and philosophy of science for a while. And I really drilled down on like the scientific method in particular. And I just found like that Darwinian evolution and the 6,000-year-old Earth model both did not conform to the scientific method. And that sort of, it depends on which area of the sciences we're talking about, because like if someone was like, okay, well, prove it, and it's like, all right, well, I guess it would differ if we were talking about like geology or biology or whatever, so it's like it would depend on the field, and then I could just give separate evidences against it, that way.
And see, there's the thing. One of the most interesting and weird things I've ever seen is young Earth creationists debating old Earth creationists versus debating people with others. And I'm like, guys, really, are you just doing this for fun or what? I don't even get why this is fun. anymore, because I am actually with you. As an atheist, I was always searching, and I thought I was going to find my answers in science, so I devoured science books, including all the popular ones, but also really deep ones. And I liked reading peer-reviewed papers in the original, when I could get them, and hanging out with scientists because I love science so much, and I know a lot in multiple fields. And whether it's all BS or not is another question. But I mean, I absorbed the knowledge in all those atheist years.
What I noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but if you're reading like a paper from, whether it be from someone who believes in a young Earth or someone who believes in an old Earth, and they take this the whole evolutionary approach. The problem I see with either or is that they read their presuppositions into their science, right?
Yes.
And so it's like,
it, brother.
It's almost impossible to get an actually objective breakdown of things scientifically these days, because people are just going to read their assumptions about the age of the Earth and all that into their work. So it's like, oh man, you have to dig so deep just to just to be like, is this true? Is it not? Is there actually any evidence to support this? It complicates the issue. Can we please just have an honest discussion about the science itself?
As an atheist, I had read a whole lot of science, including a lot on genetics and a lot on evolutionary biology and all that. And I knew that Richard Dawkins, even back then, was exaggerating how much you could explain through genes. I already knew it. And I already knew that I would listen to the creation versus evolution debates, and I would hear the atheist evolution defender get it wrong. And I don't mean get it wrong on the Bible or get it wrong on, I mean literally get the contemporary known scientific data wrong, misrepresent the field. And that also was why I ran away from those debates. And it made not just Christians look crazy, but it started to make atheists look crazy. Because I've heard atheists say the dumbest things in debates. And it's funny because I know that there are holes in evolutionary theory, and big holes that the scientific naturalists cannot explain. And they make excuses and they say, well, we'll figure it out eventually. But those holes are there. And by the way, when I mentioned as an atheist to my fellow atheists, no, you should just acknowledge that there are holes in evolutionary theory, because they are. That's how science works. When there's holes in your theory, you acknowledge them. And again, they pilloried me like an unbeliever and a blasphemer for saying that. Because it's true, sometimes many of the young Earth creationists, I'll finish and stop ranting now, they leap on problems in contemporary theory purely to explain their own point of view. And that's not honest either, because there's often more than one way to look at a problem. And they'll leap on it. So see, this proves how we read the story of Noah is true. And that's not fair either, because there are real big problems in evolutionary theory.
Right. Those holes that you mentioned in the theory, how they're always the opposition, and that being the atheists and the materialists, are always charging the theists with the God of the gaps fallacy, which is, by the way, that's such a misused fallacy by them. They don't properly understand how it works, for one. But on the other hand, they have their whole evolution of the gaps fallacy, don't they? Because whenever it's the theists, they're like, oh, well, I mean, you're just plugging God into your ignorance of this particular scientific process here. But they're doing the same thing, and I swear they just don't know it, because they're plugging evolution and Darwin and all that into the gaps in their knowledge about certain things as well. So that's a problem. And then I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but it seems there is a stigma, a really noticeable stigma in academia when it comes to say intelligent design theory. It's it's impossible almost to get a paper published, or to give a lecture or whatever in academia today if it has anything really remotely to do with intelligent design. Like if you mention God at all, or a creator in general, you're looked at like you have three heads.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not right either. That's not right either.
Yeah.
Well, there's.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
With that happens a lot within science, because you have in quantum mechanics the unobserved observer principle, because the particles don't turn into wavelengths without being observed. So for reality to actually be in existence, we'd have to be observed from something that is outside of our reality, essentially. And you could that definitely fits into God, but they can't say God. They can't say any type of description that we could give God. They can't give it. So it's the unknown observer, the unseen observer.
And what's funny about that is, the people who so adamantly deny intelligent design, they remind me a lot of the Newtonian physics guys back in the day, right? Like when quantum mechanics was first making its rounds in the early 1900s, after Max Planck. They were looking at quantum mechanics and they were like, well, this is nonsense. This doesn't fit with Newtonian physics. It doesn't. What are you guys talking about? No, we don't accept this. Now, fast forward, a century later, and quantum mechanics is a staple in modern day physics, isn't it? Funny how that works.
That's because we can actually observe it, and this is one of my problems with evolution. It's not that I don't think evolution can be possible. Just like everybody said, there are holes in it, and a big reason why those holes exist is because evolution isn't something that you can actually observe within one lifetime. Like one generation cannot actually observe evolution. It's not going to be for another couple million years until we have millions of years of data to actually look at.
Notice that these are people, the atheist ideologues, the naturalist ideologues and bullies will say that we get to auto-exclude other explanations because that's not science. But I'm sorry, they don't get to declare that. They really don't.
Yeah,
nobody get to declare that.
No one person or group should ever have a monopoly on the sciences.
And more to the point, let me just point out one of the things that's tragic about the obsession of atheists with creationism. The atheist obsession actually impedes firm understanding of evolutionary theory. Let's say that you are a firm believer in all the basics of contemporary evolutionary theory. A thing that you should know is that for more than a decade, it has been undeniable truth for more than a decade that the selfish gene theory of Richard Dawkins has no scientific merit whatsoever. It has none. Zero. It is not scientifically valid. It is not, in fact, science. There is nothing about selfish gene that is science, and it is almost all incorrect. What science is in there at all is almost all incorrect. She is not the only one to have done this, but if you look into an evolutionary biologist named Lynn Margulis, one of the most influential and successful evolutionary biologists to ever live, responsible for, in many ways, the founding of the entire field of exobiology, and made quite a few other massive contributions to evolutionary theory. In 2009, this says 3 December 2012, but that's when it was released. It was kept by Oxford University, by Voices from Oxford for like 3 years before they finally released it, right around the time of her death. This is a debate between Richard Dawkins and Lynn Margulis on selfish gene theory and what's called neo-Darwinism, because neo-Darwinism is the underlying theory that selfish gene is based on. It's a little more rigorous. Basically, it states that evolution operates primarily by random mutation and natural selection, weeding out bad genes and leaving in good through a process of competition. That's kind of how everybody thinks evolution works. And by the way, it's just dead wrong. That is not how contemporary evolutionary biologists think. Not most of them, anyway. And if you watch this debate, Lynn Margulis, she starts by saying, I like the selfish gene theory, and it does describe certain things. I mean, you know, you do have survival of the fittest, and you do have mutation, and these do things. And then she goes on a lengthy expose and explanation of how evolution works at a cellular level and a microcellular level, and even a genetic level, although she would tell you what other evolutionary biologists know now. It is an open secret that genes are overrated, and genes are not necessarily central to what's going on in cellular biology at all. It may be more, it's really, many are starting to see not just epigenetics, but epigenetics is part of it, but also there's the reality that you have more organisms in your body than you have cells. You have more germs and bacteria, viruses, or not, or DNA chains running through your system than you do cells. And these things move freely in and out of your cells all the time, interacting with them. And the cells exhibit their own behavior, including cells can lose their DNA completely and have none, and they continue to function and do everything they did when the DNA was there. And sometimes they can replace their whole DNA chain, and then you might, now you got an infection and stuff. But in fact, they've shown cells can operate just fine without, and often do, without their DNA. The whole idea that it's central to the DNA is like the pseudoscience superstition of today. Evolution doesn't work this way. It just doesn't. Now, Lynn Margulis had her own theories that not all evolutionary biologists accept, but there are plenty of other contemporary biologists who would agree with her of all the flaws in selfish gene and what is called the neo-Darwinist paradigm. And every time I try to tell somebody about this, they accuse me of being a closet Christian trying to turn them into a creationist. It's infuriating. Literally, the atheists, people like the Great Debate community, or anybody who is still holding a torch for Richard Dawkins needs to know, selfish gene is fake. It's pseudoscience. It's garbage in every way. It's garbage. Not how evolution works.
It's almost as garbage as the whole junk DNA stuff. Do you remember that?
Yes, that was what they used to try and explain certain things away. It's like dark matter, which, by the way, is another open issue in contemporary physics, which is that, you know, they keep saying, "Oh, we've discovered more dark matter here," or like bullshit. You have yet to demonstrate that dark matter exists. You just need the dark matter to make your calculations work. I know that.
Well, that's really all.
That's all.
Go ahead, Slim Jim. We've been talking too much. Your turn to talk.
That's all that really dark matter is, though. It's just a mathematical inference. I mean, you read any work on the subject, and they'll say, "Yeah, like we're not even sure if this stuff is real." But I mean, the math works out. So,
and it's so funny how they'll do it in the Popular Science account. They're like, "We've discovered so much more dark matter," when really what they mean is our calculations are broken and we need to assume more dark matter for things to still work.
Well, I mean, you do have to think that, you know, if there is no dark matter, then the universe basically flies apart at the seams.
Well, that's a weird thing too, because you would think that dark matter would be easier to observe in space, where you know, because there's a lot of reasons why the Hadron Collider isn't, you know, constantly running. There's a long years worth of waiting list, and I think they only turn on like once or twice a year. There's some really, you know, big questions on, you know, how much damage this is actually do. Actually being able to see, you know, for a split second what particles do when this is activated. Like, we have no actual way to observe particles.
This is what Ken Ham does, which is that, you know, he actually, I will give Ken Ham this. Many things Ken Ham says are true. This is probably why they don't like him. I still think he's off on a nut. This is why I keep thinking I'm going to invite him to come on here, see if I can actually get him on. Because I think his interpretation of Scripture is still deranged. But he is actually smart. He has pointed out the truth, which is that if the speed of light is not a constant, then the theory of relativity is false. And the Big Bang Theory, therefore, is almost certainly false if the speed of light is not a constant, because both theories hinge on the idea that light is a constant. And there is, of course, evidence for this, that light is a constant. However, there is also evidence that light fluctuates after all, and that it's truly not a constant, that it's only maybe sort of a constant. And if that is true, Big Bang probably just meaningless. And a whole lot of what we think about cosmology will just have to be completely rethought. And there is evidence that the speed of light may not be a constant. That is true. Now, that doesn't mean Ken Ham gets to be right about anything, or Kent Hovind. I've been saying Kent Hovind, meaning that doesn't make Kent Hovind right about things either. But he's smart. He's able to say, "You're right." You know, it's true. If the speed of light fluctuates, then much of what we think we know is not true at all. And a whole lot of it is true. Like basically most of how we've calculated the age of the universe, how far the stars are away, what their behavior is, why they do certain things, will all be like you know, house of cards falling apart, because like you cannot assume the speed of light is a constant anymore. And there is evidence that it's not a constant. Isn't that interesting?
How dare you question the majority consensus, Mr. Max?
And you know, you listen to some of these people and they're going to scream, Max says the speed of light's not a constant. No, I didn't. Made no such claim at all. Did I? Did anybody?
He said it. He said it. I'm just kidding.
All I said was, is there is evidence for that proposition? Because there is.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of evidence, let me know what you guys think of this, but just saying that a majority of scholars in a particular field agree that something is true, that doesn't inherently make it true.
Say that again.
Yeah.
If science, but what he's basically said is, if scientists all say that something is true, that doesn't mean it is true, and he's correct, because you have the you know, at the Newtonian people during Einstein's day, because Einstein, you know, with his mathematics, he didn't only do the relativity, he did he helped, you know, basically discover molecules, and you know, Madame Curie was somebody who he learned from as well. That's part of what made him actually challenge the ether theory, because Newton, you know, said space was filled with ether, and or something like a substance that is, you know, not really describable, and Einstein's like it's radiation. And then we later found out he was correct about that. But it's, you know, for a long time, what is, you know, what has been perceived in science to be true, you know, sometimes turns out not to be true at all. You know, at one time, a Earth-centric solar system made sense. That the Earth was the center and everything else was revolving around it. That actually made sense to science, and that was true for a little bit. The Earth being flat was also true according to science at one time.
Yeah, and that even let me even interrupt, and that gets me to it too. I have the same attitude about flat earthers, although I actually find the flat earthers a lot more fascinating at this point, because they actually seem more sophisticated, and they're not even all Christian, which doesn't. Just being not Christian isn't better per se, but I mean, they've arrived at their flat earth conclusions independent of the Bible. And they've put up some pretty impressive defenses on some of it. But I'm like, I have the old scientist attitude that I had when I was an atheist. Well, that's a provocative theory. Go ahead, and it's a minority theory that's out there. And that's what a real scientist classically would have done. The flat earthers should be treated as having a minority theory. And one, I don't find that plausible. But at the same time, how do I know? Literally, how do I know? And people will say, well, you've seen a globe your whole life. Yeah, I know. That doesn't mean it's true. I've seen satellite imagery. Yeah, well, NASA is full of shit a lot too, aren't they? I'm like, how do you know anything? If you believe in the Big Bang Theory, you believe that on faith. I'm willing to bet that not anyone in the entire atheist, skeptic, rationalist community, up to and including Lawrence Krauss, can demonstrate that he truly understands the Big Bang Theory, can work out the math himself, and can point to all of the evidence that he can show has demonstrated it to be true to his satisfaction. Nobody in the atheist community can do that. And I would have said that as an atheist. You're taking it on faith. You believe the scientists who came before and the scientists who are telling you this now. That's all that's happening. And that's all that's happening with evolution too. There is hardly a person, maybe a few field biologists out there that's listening to this. Maybe a field biologist is out there listening to this, but otherwise there is not a person listening to this who has any ability whatsoever to test for himself if evolutionary theory is true. Steve McCrae, he takes evolution on faith. He takes the scientific, or Crocoduck, or any of those people. They take it on faith. They believe institutional science as it's come to be understood in their lifetimes. That's what they know. That's what they believe. And that's entirely a faith proposition, isn't it?
You know, though, I actually don't like that kind of phrasing.
Okay.
Well, to me, it cheapens the meaning of the word faith. Kind of reverse engineers it into a backwards insult against believers.
Well, I think there's a difference between the colloquial usage of the word faith and then faith in the biblical context.
So, well, let me tell you, faith in the biblical context, I will argue, as Thomas Aquinas and many others have, no, it is perfectly, faith is a belief based on a rational proposition. Based on a rational proposition and evidence that makes sense to you. That's what faith is. Now, from a spiritual perspective, that's like the kindergarten step of faith, right? The very first is this makes sense to me, right? That's what the so-called leap of faith is. This makes sense to me. But I mean, then as you begin learning more and more about the faith, it becomes a much deeper and richer thing, right? That's how I would put it. Does that make sense to you, Slim Jim?
Yeah, it does. When I say that, or when we try to say that, well, yeah, you know, you take this theory on faith, it just seems to me like we're taking the same premise that atheists would use against us. You know, well, your faith is, or your beliefs are completely faith without real, you know, anything that you can actually work out for yourself. And it turns it around into us saying, you know, well, yeah, your beliefs on evolution or science, or, you know, you can't completely work it out yourself. You know, you're relying on what other people are telling you. Like, to me, somebody who has more than like a passing familiarity with, you know, like say the 5 ways, for example, that it kind of feels like I'm making a concession that I don't need to when I say something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I spend so much time arguing with the logical fallacies that the atheist ideologues deal in. I can't not rub it in their faces that no, truly, King Crocoduck is not capable, even as a physicist, I don't believe, of demonstrating that he fully and completely understands the Big Bang Theory in its, you know, as well as Einstein and Lemaitre, and could, demonstrate it, is, for a group of master's students, for example, of undergrads, not of graduate students, I mean, in physics. I don't think he could do it. It's that stuff is really complicated. We really do take a certain leap of faith just believing it. We're not required to, because really, you've read about this in textbooks and you've heard about it your whole life, so it makes sense to you. I assert that that's the only reason anyone in this conversation believes the Big Bang Theory. Has anybody got any other reason that they're willing to step up and defend it?
Well, I mean, I haven't personally calculated redshift, but the explanation seems legit.
Exactly. It does seem legit. It does seem legit, and it makes sense. Yes.
Can you repeat that question, Max? I cut out for a little bit.
Oh, literally, are you capable of saying that you understand the Big Bang Theory and the supporting evidence well enough that you could present it like for a group of master's degree students in physics? Do you think you could do that?
Nope. And you know what? Most people are laymen when it comes to the sciences. So I think you're right when you say most people would not be able to either.
It's a big proposition, and ultimately it is. If you're convinced, like Godless Engineer literally practically screamed at me once that he knows the Big Bang Theory is true. I'm like, really? How? Like, I mean, it was like a Baptist screaming, he knows he knows Jesus is X, Y, or Z. I'm like, how, really? I believe in the Big Bang Theory too, but they drive me crazy. But anyway.
Well, I mean, without the Big Bang Theory, cosmic rays doesn't actually make a lot of sense.
A lot of the problem too is like when we get into, well, I know for sure that this, and then we just get into epistemology, and that's a rabbit hole that I don't really want to tumble down.
Commenters, we're going to comment stream. Let me pull out a couple of commenters. Someone called Icon. I can't tell if Icon is challenging or not. Or just making an observation. Says, I haven't done the math on how my IP packets got error checked and delivered to routers to make this text show up in your chat box, but here we are. Yeah, although I actually can do that math. I am a network engineer amongst other things, and I can count in binary, and I know how subnetting and subnetting works and all that. It's not that useful in my everyday life, though, is it? I don't need to know that. And if you, for example, Icon, thought you understood how packet switched IP networking works and how subnetting works and all that, but you were wrong and you understood it wrong, it literally would not change your life in any way, would it? Unless you're a network engineer, why would it matter? That's kind of the point. I go backwards on a lot of this,
I think there's a massive difference. What did he say about like package delivery?
Yeah, well, he's basically making. Look, if you know how the internet works, everything. This whole conversation and all the text in the windows and all that is is broken up into small data chunks called packets. The whole internet works by packet switching, and so you've got checksums and CRCs and headers at various network topology layers. I could actually give you a whole list on something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's a massive difference between that and then Big Bang cosmology. Because let's face it,
except that actually
test. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I can test the packet switching and I can show you that it works.
Yeah,
I can't do that with the Big Bang Theory.
Precisely. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say I don't have to be an electrician to know how to turn the lights on.
Yeah. And literally there are people out there who are perfectly functioning doctors and lawyers and everything, and scientists who believe the weirdest things in the world. And so what? I know some. By the way, all this stuff we're saying in physics, I'll say it straight up. If the digital physics theory, which is contemporary physics, if the digital physics theory is true, if the digital universe theory is true, then everything in Einstein and everything else that we've talked about is a joke. Because if the digital universe theory is true, is true, and by the way, I do not say the digital universe theory is true. I just say if it's true, then yeah, everything we're talking about is a joke. Because, and by the way, Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson think this theory is true. They've said so publicly. That doesn't make it true, just that they have. So if you're an atheist, you should be aware that they have. I know Christians and I know scientists of other religious views also believe the digital universe theory is true. And if the digital universe theory is true, then this is all being projected in real time, basically for us, more or less into our minds. Our entire physical existence is being projected as if we are in an immersive 3D video game. Like, let's say, what was the last, was it Call of the Wild, the last Zelda game? The last really big one? Where you, and the digital universe theory ultimately suggests that, yeah, nothing's actually there until it's being observed by a person. Is simply not there, that it's more or less rendered in real time when we observe it. Exactly like when you're in the Legend of Zelda game and you're looking around in 3D, up, down, etc. That the only thing that's actually there is being rendered is what's on your screen. And the digital universe theory essentially says that's how the whole universe works. If it's not, it's basically that it's stored until we go look at it or touch it or hear it or whatever. It's just stored as information, and then when we observe it, it's brought up to show to us. This is contemporary physics that a lot of physicists think is valid. Some will assert that it's stronger than Big Bang Theory. Now, again, it's just a theory. It may not be true, but if it is, everything we've been talking about with Einstein or Newton or evolution or any of that, you can throw it out the window because the universe is basically being run like a big video game. And it's almost futile to say you know how old the Earth is or any of that stuff.
Well,
like
if that's
it would mean gravity doesn't really exist. It's just part of the physics engine written into our video game like existence. You know, and the stars literally are being projected for us when we look at them. They may not be there at all otherwise.
If that theory is true.
If that theory is true, that's correct. If that theory is true, then galaxies and nebulas and all that really aren't there unless someone's there, and then they may just be there for us to look at, like in a Zelda game.
Makes you wonder why they snuffed out a lot of Nikola Tesla's work, huh?
Nikola Tesla had wild ideas about something called the electric universe, I think, that like the entire universe.
I take that model pretty seriously. I'm not advocating for it, but I think there's way more evidence backing the electric universe than the Big Bang cosmology stuff.
We should probably get wrapping this up soon. This is a good conversation. We should wrap it up soon. We should also think of people to send it to, because I would love to. I'm not on Twitter, but if people would send this conversation to Adam Friended, he's been ducking me for 3 years. He ought to have the guts to talk to me. This is a good conversation, and he should be having these kind of conversations. Don't bother the Great Debate people. I just or the non sequitur people. I don't think any of them will have the decency to acknowledge anything said here. But if anybody wants to send it, and maybe and some young Earth creationists you might know, or that we've run into, somebody send this to the Levitical for me too, right? Send it to Lev. He should hear this. But anyway, I want to give us the electric universe theory of Nikola Tesla in a nutshell, and then we'll kind of wrap this up.
I'll do you one better. If anyone wants to learn more about it, just go to this group called the Thunderbolts Project. And basically what that is it's a bunch of scientists who are trying to carry on the work of Nikola Tesla.
Well, let me see if I can find a link online to show. Well, that wasn't hard. I went into DuckDuckGo, and I found the Thunderbolts Project, a voice for the electric universe. Would I assume correctly that there are actual credentialed, degreed physicists here?
Yes, sir.
Along with other researchers, I'm sure you don't have to have credentials to be interested in these things. There you go. Okay, and all right, so there's we could go to learn a lot more. But how about I want you to tell me in a minute or two what's the basic idea, or can you?
Well, I think I would butcher some parts because it's a It's a theory that I just started to research and study about probably 6 months ago or so. So I don't know all the ins and outs yet. So I just wouldn't want to butcher it.
Okay, fair enough. I know that. Okay, and I'll go ahead and butcher it because as someone who doesn't understand it, frankly, I'm not ever going to go more than just, you might get me to watch a 20-minute presentation, and that's about as far as my interest is going to go because my universe is no longer that, my world is no longer that caught up in these things, but I always am interested. If I understand it correctly, basically, it's the idea that really reality is all various frequencies and vibrations of electricity, because electricity, of course, is not really. There's a common misperception that electricity is electrons. Because that's what's being pushed through. Like you're getting a flow of electrons through your light bulb when you turn the light bulb on. So people think electricity is electrons, but it is not. Electricity is actually the force that drives electrons, at least under the standard models of physics anyway. Digital universe destroys this idea, I think, but in any case, maybe it doesn't.
Basically,
anyway.
One of the biggest implications, if say the electric universe theory is true, would be that it would be absolute mayhem for the electric companies, because that would mean that energy is everywhere, which it is, and it can be harnessed, and it's free.
That would be one upshot of it if you know how to exploit it, if you know how to do it, which is the genius Tesla, said he had ways of doing this, and then he died and his work was destroyed. Anyway, the point I was going to make was that, just to finish, people think electricity is electrons. It is not. We see the flashing electron bolts, whatever. In reality, as this is understood, electricity is what's pushing the electrons. It's what's making them go that way. And that the force of electricity does not necessarily just work with electrons. Like the flow of electricity can leave the electrons behind, and the electricity is no longer working with electrons, but it's working with other things. So that electricity is, the electricity is a force that's using the electrons. It's not the electrons, and the electricity can use other things besides electrons to move stuff around. Now that's a really, a physicist probably just barfed and said you said that's stupid, but really I think that's basically a good way of putting it, and that the idea is that the whole universe is being driven by electricity. I think that the electric universe theory is also very popular with pantheists, because it kind of lends itself to pantheism, because it kind of has this idea that electricity is this force doing all these things, but in different ways at different times. So, yeah, it's pretty funky. So, did anybody have any final thoughts they wanted to get out?
Yeah. When it comes to the sciences, when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to politics, whatever, don't just take the word of academics at face value and run with it. Do your own thinking on the matter.
Yes.
Look into alternative sources. Really try to gain a holistic understanding of things before you decide to draw a conclusion and then become so dogmatic about it.
Yeah, good thoughts. Jean-Baptiste or Slim Jim? Slim Jim, did you have any final thoughts?
Sub to my channel.
What? Yeah, sub to Slim Jim's channel. I think we had a really good conversation here, though.
Shameless plugging for the win.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
No,
Okay.
well, in all seriousness, though, wow, I don't think I had that much bourbon. In all seriousness, when it comes to the whole thing, I just want to reiterate the point that, especially to my fellow believers, that this is not a big issue. This doesn't determine whether or not you go to heaven or hell or anything like that. So, for the love of God, stop putting money in these hucksters' pockets.
Yes. Amen. Amen. I say amen. And I think even some young earth creationists who really are convinced of young earth creationists may want to say amen too, because really, hopefully what they've heard, I pray the Holy Spirit moves them to hear that actually, even if they're right, it's like, in the grand scheme of things, you might be doing more harm than good by insisting that you're right. Maybe gently let people come to the conclusion that you're right, because that's not what's important, especially in a Christian context. What's important is this JC guy, and so please start there, and let people think for themselves. Really, one of the reasons I didn't want to become a Christian was because of the young Earth creationists. They drove me insane. Now I'm pretty chill about it, especially after this conversation. And actually, I hope everybody else is more chill after this conversation too, because there is the obsession with this is absurd to a whole lot of people and tiring. It's just tiring. Can we please talk about something else? All right, everybody. Well, listen. Okay, tomorrow night, Jean-Baptiste, you're going to be doing the news stream, right?
Tomorrow I'm going to be doing a kind of a special thing, because I while I was looking up for This Week in Atheist Stupid, I found out some interesting things about people who have gotten fined for doing Bible study and prayer groups of more than 10 people at their homes. So I'm going to talk about that tomorrow.
All right, the Week in Atheist Stupid. Every Friday is the Week in Atheist Stupid with Jean-Baptiste. I appreciate you doing that so much. Sometimes I join in. We've got interviews coming up this weekend. We've got interviews with religious people, non-religious people. Skylar Fiction might want to come back. We may just be having something like that in the next week or two. So we are here every night. We're here every day. Please give us a like on our new channel. Please help us grow the new channel. Please give us a subscribe. Hit that bell to get notifications. Please give us your financial as well as your spiritual support on redpillreligion.com. And God bless everybody.